Kamusta na kayo?
Hola, hola, everyone.
What's good, everybody? My name is Nico
And
Blitz.
I'm Jackie Ramirez.
And this is the Mexipino podcast, episode 35.
35. Wow.
35. Five
Dang.
more until 40.
That is insane that we've done 35 episodes.
I know, it's already beat my podcast. I think I
Oh my
stopped at like 30.
gosh.
I think I ended at 30 so far. But yeah,
Oh
episode
God.
35, everybody. So thank you all so much for tuning in once again. We do also want to say thank you to everybody who's purchased a ticket for the Mexipino Food Fest going down on October 16th in District 6,
Yes.
San Francisco, California, to be exact.
Yeah. And in case you guys don't know what's going on, Nico and I are throwing our very first Mexipino Food Fest. Obviously, like he
Yes.
said, it's going to be the first one is going to be in the Bay Area. I know a lot of people are asking for an LA one and a San Diego one. So don't worry, we are in the works of that too. But all the information for our San Francisco Food Fest will be right here in between us. And you guys can also check it out on our Instagram pages, Instagram pages on
Yeah.
the Mexipino podcast, on Nico's Instagram and my Instagram. And then as well as the links in our bios and links in the description will take you directly to our Eventbrite where you can purchase tickets.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's so cool about it was that like I don't think Jackie and I really anticipated how crazy that post would be. Like, I don't know, it got shared over like 1,000 times on Instagram, which was insane.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, we thought we were gonna have a hard time grabbing all the vendors, but all the vendors kind of just like came our way. So we haven't got a finalized list yet of our vendors. We do have a
We do.
couple of vendors that are like verified though. So
Yes.
by the next podcast, we should be able to list every single vendor that will be there. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun day. It's gonna be a really fun day. Once again, we're gonna have the Niners game going on, and Sanzo is actually supplying a whole bunch of soda cans, which
Yes.
I want to get into a very quick story about these Sanzo soda cans that were delivered to my place. So
Go ahead.
over this past weekend, it was Jackie's dad's 52nd birthday, but we
Yeah.
celebrated it as if it was his 50th because 2 years in
Pandemic.
COVID, yeah, the pandemic year, so we were still celebrating 50 while he's
Hmm.
52.
Yes.
So long story short, I was out of town, out of San Francisco for a couple days, and literally the morning I left was the same morning that our sponsor Sanzo delivered like 9 crates of soda
Of soda
cans.
cans. And it
And
sucks.
it sucked because my dad has a bad lower back and my mom was the only one at the house. So my mom ended up texting me a photo of like 9 crates of soda cans and saying like, "You're welcome. I just carried all of this into the house and I have no clue what it is." And I'm like, "Oh, it's the soda cans from Sanzo."
Oh my gosh. I felt so bad once Nico told me that his mom like brought it all in. I was just like, I feel horrible right now.
I was
Like that.
dying.
Yeah, but shout out to Sanzo for sponsoring this event, for supplying the sodas. Shout out to District 6, the venue. It's gonna be really, really fun. It's not gonna only just be, Mexican and Filipino food vendors, but it's also going to be Mexican and Filipino owned clothing brands and crafts and different creatives. It's gonna be a really cool. It's like kind of like I would say like a night market during the day, you know?
So a day market?
A day market, a flea market, not flea market, day market.
Well, it's a food
Yeah.
fest,
Well,
right?
food fest. Yeah. It's more like we wanted to focus more on food though. Yeah. So,
Yeah, yeah, for
but
sure, for sure.
we're super excited. Shout out to our DJs who are going to be DJing Midas, DJ Midas. I don't even know if that's who he goes by.
Anthony Midas,
Anthony Midas.
San
Yeah.
Jose's finest.
I'm sick.
And also
But yeah.
DJ Kizza. Shout out to them. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're dope.
So
But
Anthony Midas and
yeah,
Kizza.
yeah. But Food Fest aside, for this podcast, I actually personally wanted to heavily focus on this particular subject.
Mhm.
How Chicano culture got to Japan. And I will say this. I think over the years, Jackie and I have just come across like random videos on YouTube where basically you have like Chicano culture just smack in the middle of like random ass cities in Japan. And we posted a clip sometime last week that just went super crazy. And some people are like, "Oh my god, I never really knew this." And other people were just like, "Well, duh." And I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's not that obvious. Like, it's really not that obvious. So, to
Mm.
kind of give a little backstory too about how not obvious it was, I was talking to my brother-in-law Jason about this subject, and he was
Mhm.
just like, "Oh, word." So then I showed him this very specific YouTube video from Vice Asia, and it was literally like you could see lowriders, you could see like I guess like um East LA style type shops. It
Yes,
You
like
get what
mom
I'm
and pop.
saying?
Yes, like
Yeah,
mom
like the
and
mom and
pop.
pop shots that be selling like the clothes and like just like random shit
Yeah. And
in
I
Japan.
and I guess like so the reason I knew about this, like I've known about this for I want to say maybe like 5 years or 6 years now that I've known that like Chicano culture is very present in Japan is because I took 4 years of Japanese in high school, and then it got me curious. Like I've always wanted to go to Japan. I still believe that I'm going to go one day.
Damn, she
But then
said
like
I'm gonna go. Like I'm not gonna go with her. That's crazy, y'all.
you
That
are
is
gonna
crazy. No,
go.
but
You are.
you just said I believe I'm gonna go one
Okay,
day.
I'm gonna start calling you out when you say like you want to talk about Seattle and your
What?
move, and you're all like, yeah, I know I'm not gonna stay in California
Oh
forever.
my god.
So there we go.
I'm
Okay,
just
be
letting you know. You
quiet.
let the people know. Like I'm gonna go to Japan one day.
Anyway, so I knew about this for like 5 or 6 years that like Chicano culture was very present in Japan, and then I found a YouTube video of a Japanese and Mexican cumbia band, and I listened to it, and the music, the rhythm is very much cumbia style type of rhythm,
Crazy.
but the lyrics are all sung in Japanese, and it is wild to me. Like I was looking at it, I was like, do I understand this or do I not understand this? Like it's crazy. It's crazy, but it's so cool to me how they like our culture has so much influence on it, on Japanese culture. And like they've just kind of adopted it. They've like just created their own wave of it. Like it's pretty cool. It's really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, I think as Americans, well, English speaking Americans rather,
Mhm.
I think we get so jaded when we have this understanding that other cultures learn English. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is like, like when you're in the Philippines, like their second language is English. In
Mhm.
Japan, I'm not sure what their second language is, but I'm for sure they know English. And
Mhm.
if you go in like other parts of the world, let's say even like Mexico, I'm pretty sure their second language is English. So we don't come to the conclusion that like these cultures could also have like third languages that they're very fluent in, and one of these being Spanish.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to me, like, when Jackie talks about the video that she was talking about, like how they also know Spanish. I remember
Yeah.
one time. This is one time when I was a kid that I will just never forget, and I came to that realization. Like, I took the bus going to and from school and from wherever I was at, and so one day I was leaving the mall, and I was so tired, so I had like both my hands on top of my eyes like this.
Mhm.
And next thing you know, I hear two ladies speaking Spanish, and I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. And then once I'm done rubbing my eyes, and I look up, and it's actually two Asian ladies.
Yeah.
And I was like, this makes sense, but it doesn't right now. Like my brain couldn't comprehend what was going on.
Well, what also too I find it really fascinating, like how you said, like a lot of countries, their second language, like countries that are not in obviously America, their second language is English. But I remember coming across this YouTube channel called ODG, and
Mhm.
it's a South Korean like variety channel, and they always have kids interact with American kids. like South Korean or Korean kids interact with American kids, and teenagers and adults, same thing. Um, and what I noticed is that with the Latin American like people who speak English but don't speak Korean, and then the Koreans who don't speak English at all, they have a common language, which is Spanish. Because a lot of
Mm.
Koreans in this like YouTube channel that I watch, they know Spanish. And it's kind of crazy because like I would like see it, I'm just like, this looks this like it doesn't look weird. It just looks like it just looks different. I'm just like, what the heck? Like that's so crazy and that's so cool that it's not like the common language isn't English. It's like something else, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it's just funny to me how we just don't think about these things. Like I feel like as English speaking Americans, we feel like our language is the most superior and like
Oh,
the most known across the land type of shit.
yeah.
But it's like,
But
I mean, would Spanish be like the second language after like English in
I
terms of
think
like
it
most spoken?
I think it might be, or it might be Mandarin.
Oh man, oh well, I mean, I'll let you know right now. I know more Spanish than I do Mandarin, so
I think it would go Spanish and then Mandarin. Let me look that up actually, because top three languages in the world is English, man. Oh,
Wow,
this it
actually,
it's
fun
not.
fact. You want to tell everybody?
So English is number one, Mandarin is number two, Hindi is number three, and four is Spanish.
That's
Wow.
crazy. But
And then
what's
five is
so
French. So those are
nice?
top five.
Well,
Wow,
what's
that's
so
so
funny? I
interesting.
think we kind of have like conflicting posts right now because according to an article from the British Council in 2014, it said more people speak Spanish than English. It's the second
What?
most widely spoken language in the world after Mandarin Chinese. Granted,
Wow.
this article was from 2014, but I
I
guess
just
the
looked up.
consensus is that the
This
top
is from
3.
2021.
Okay, okay.
This one's
So
from
from 20, okay, so you're
2021.
correct. You're correct. You're correct.
Period.
So you
I'm
said
always right,
okay,
babe.
so you said okay, can you reiterate that one more time?
Okay. So the top five languages in the world are number one, English with 1.120 1.132 million speakers,
That's crazy.
Mandarin with 1.117 million speakers, Hindi with 615 million speakers, Spanish with 534 million speakers, and French at number 5 with 280 million speakers.
Damn, so Spanish is in the top 4. That's kind of insane.
Yeah. You know what's crazy too is that like it's funny because Japanese isn't on there, and it's so funny because when I took Japanese in high school, I wanted to take Spanish because I
Mhm.
wanted the easy A, and my dad's all like, "No, you already know it. Like, you want take something else." So then I was just like, "Okay." So I was like, "Okay, I'll take French." And my dad's like, "Well, when are you ever gonna go to France?" And I was like,
Damn.
"Okay." I was like, "Well, the only other option is Japanese." I was like, and he's all like, "Well, to be honest, you have to think about it. How many more like Japanese people do you run into than French people?" And I was just like,
What does that even mean?
well, because I grew up
What?
like well, because he wants me to be like, and it's true. Like I don't think I've ever run into a French person in my life, but I've run into more Japanese people in my life and I'm able to communicate with them in their own language.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. But then I could also see why Japanese is not on that list because it's so small.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas you think of like Spanish speaking countries, it's like there's so many. So
Yeah.
it's like, South America, for example, is just so massive. So you can see why, or, in English, I mean, you have Europe who basically talks English. You have North America that basically, like, everywhere talks English. So I could
Mhm.
understand that. But, I guess to say, like, it is interesting, from your perspective, if you're like a Mexican American who could speak Japanese, I'm sure like someone who is of Japanese descent would probably be like, okay, I'm thrown off now.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
I never realized that this existed type of thing.
Yeah.
But
No.
I think the Japanese and Chicano culture like goes back like super far, y'all. Like as far back as like the 1800s. So when I tell y'all I was doing a deep dive about all of this, and I have all my
Hmm.
notes to the left of me to tell y'all what is going on with this, like I
Hmm.
went deep, y'all. So just to kind of put it into perspective too, as of 2019, there are about 28,000 Japanese descendants in Mexico, which I think they
28,000.
28,000, which isn't too
Dang.
much. Like it's really not
It's
too
not too
much,
much.
but to think like there's like a little subculture there is kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. It's like it's not 28,000 in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot, but to even that, like there is 28,000 is like that's kind of crazy, you know?
It is crazy. So when they initially migrated from Japan to Mexico, I guess they started in Chiapas. Did I say that city correctly?
Chiapas? Uh-huh.
Chiapas?
Chiapas.
Yeah. So when Japanese people moved there in the 1800s, they actually started growing coffee plantations. So that was like their main
Oh,
source of income for the city. But
interesting.
a big reason as to why they moved from Japan to Mexico was because Japanese people were actually part of the slave trade when Spain was trying to
That's
conquer the
right.
world. So like if I could kind of map it out, like I believe Spain went to like Japan first and then went down
Hmm.
to the Philippines and then went down to
Hmm.
Mexico. So, again, it kind of makes sense as to why like Filipinos have ties with like Mexicans because, again, Spain conquered or tried to conquer the Philippines and then also went down to Mexico. But the fact that they went down to Japan too, and then to the
Yeah.
Philippines and then to Mexico, it kind of makes me think about like all the people who kind of got mixed in between, for example. Like
Hmm.
at one point you might have had like some Japanese people like crossbreeding with like some Filipinos at the time, and then even
Yeah.
like further mixing with like Mexicans. So like it actually brings me back to a topic where you remember when we had kids on the podcast,
Yeah.
like how why anime is just so prevalent in Mexico and why Mexico actually gets anime before the US. They get
That's
certain
very
animes
true.
before the US, like
Hmm.
because the ties were just that much closer to Mexico first, and it goes all the way back from the 1800s.
Yeah, and it's crazy you mentioned like, kind of crossbreeding and,
Yeah,
with Japanese and Mexicans. Oh, my dad was younger. You remember how he was sent to Mexico for school for like
yeah.
a few years? He had a friend whose name was Margarita Kikuchi.
Margarita Kikut, that's super Japanese.
So her mom was Mexican, her dad was Japanese, and they owned a little like a Japanese cuisine restaurant
Do you
in
remember?
Mexico.
That's really cool. So they were probably like one of the only people, well, the only Japanese people who had a restaurant there. Was
Yeah,
it
and
profitable? I'm not entirely sure, but was it what's the word I'm looking for? Was it different from what every other restaurant was serving? 1,000%.
yeah,
But
absolutely. So like my dad talks about that how like, he did experience, Japanese or Mexican Japanese or Japanese Mexicans. Like it's crazy.
it is crazy. But well, do you know the name of the school that your dad went to? Because from
Uh
the research that I found, there's actually two schools that are dedicated to Japanese Mexicans, or rather
oh,
Japanese people who are in Mexico.
oh, I don't know. Let me ask him. I'm gonna text
Oh,
him.
no, that's all good. I mean, it's just a fun fact. So like, imagine being like just imagine like, you're Mexican, for example, right, babe? And imagine like
Mhm.
you end up going to like
Yeah, I am.
Europe. Well, I'm just but imagine going to like Europe, for example, but then there are schools dedicated to like Mexicans who like stay in Europe. It's kind of like how in
Yeah.
Hawaii they have a school
Oh,
that is solely dedicated to specifically Hawaiians. Like you
yes,
have
yeah.
to be Hawaiian to go here.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, it's really cool because I think also too, like growing up, if you're mixed, especially in a country where you're just like, I definitely look different than everybody else.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like a culture shock. Like, so okay, so am I Mexican? Am I Japanese? Like,
Hmm.
what's going on here? And that's probably why, like, my dad's friend when he was younger, Margarita, like she was grateful probably that her dad, opened up that Japanese cuisine restaurant,
Yeah. I
and
hope it's
that they
still
have.
open.
I know, right? And then like that, that they have schools because, they might teach their culture there too. It's just like, yeah, you guys are mixed and yes, you can identify with Mexican culture, but if you want to learn about your culture, here it is.
Exactly. And that's the
Mhm.
cool thing about it. Even if we talk about like educating about these specific cultures, like to kind of bridge the gap even more between not just Filipinos and Mexicans, but just like Asians and Mexicans, right? Like
Mhm.
so Spaniards actually at one point called both the Asian slaves and Mexican slaves chinos, which just meant Chinese.
Yeah.
So these
And
Spaniards looked at all of us like Chinese.
yeah, so actually, like, it wasn't until I would say recently where I think it's our generation that we started telling our parents that, hey, that term is a little kind of, racist because you
Yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
know, you're just calling someone Chino and you don't
Mhm,
know where they come from. They might not even be Chinese. And it's it's crazy too because with nicknames like in our culture, in like Mexican culture and Latino culture.
mhm.
Well, I'll say Mexican culture because that's what I'm like, representing.
That's what you grew up
But
on.
yes, that's what I grew up on.
That's what
But
I
in like
lived.
Mexican culture, I know that like our nicknames, they tend to describe our appearances.
Mm,
I've been called morena, which means darker skinned, I've been called chaparita, which means short one. I've been called a lot of things. And for people who are Mexican, who have Asian features, but they're not Asian, their nicknames are chinito or e chino.
mm. So, I guess you could say, I mean, and not to stereotype, I guess just like Mexican people with maybe like a little bit of like chinkier eyes, maybe a little bit more like light skin, that
And
sort of thing.
with
That's
Asian like
crazy.
looking features, that's their go-to nickname is a Chino or Chinito. Like I have a friend whose nickname is Chino, but I never called him that. I called him by his name. I was just like, I am not calling you that because one, I know
Yeah.
you're straight up Mexican, and two,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah,
Well, it's a weird situation because I know at the end of the day because even my family we have like nicknames for each other, right?
mm,
And whether it be like morena or moreno, referring to
mm,
like lighter skin or like darker skin, I think at the end of the day it's all very playful. And
yeah,
especially when it's like within the family, it's like your family is not being like racist towards you. It's kind of just like let me poke fun at this because like this is just kind of what you look like. And
yeah,
so like I mean in a sense it's like borderline racist, but also
and I
like
also
kind of not really.
because I also think like the term chinito in my eyes,
Yeah.
and from my perspective of things, I think the term chinito could be like, oh, what type of Asian, like
Mm,
someone can ask me like when they see me with you and they don't know if you're Filipino, they don't know if you're Mexican, they don't
yeah.
know if you're like Chinese or Japanese or
Yeah.
whatever type of Asian, they could say, oh, es chinito, and I'm just like, no, he's
I
not.
get you.
Like, he's not Chinese, but he is this type of Asian.
He is Asian,
It
yeah.
is Filipino or es Japonés or, you know.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I mean, I think it comes down to like how much ownership of the word is someone willing to take if they're called that, right? So,
Right.
for instance, it's like, when a black person is called like the N word, for example, it's like, black people have taken ownership of that word. So then they've been able
Mhm.
to flip a a very negative word into something that is part of their culture. And
Mhm.
relatively speaking, let's say even Hawaiian culture, for example, if you're mixed with like Hawaiian and white and just like a clusterfuck of just like a lot of cultures, like you're called
Yeah.
Hapa. And so, like I think even people who are Hapa, they've taken that term and they're like, yeah, we're proud to be Hapa. And I
Yeah.
think if we go back to the subject of being like Chino, I
Mhm.
mean, I don't live in this particular world in which like people are called Chino around me.
Mhm.
So I actually want to ask someone who is part of this culture, like, is this something that they take ownership of? Is this something that they're able to accept and like flip and be like, yeah, hell yeah, like I am Chino and like I'm proud of being that?
I
Or
don't
is it just something that is just a complete negative connotation that is just not to be dealt with?
I don't think it's either or, to be
Mm,
honest with you. Because Chino isn't something like that you're necessarily like proud of, or like it's more of like a description of somebody and how they
mm,
look.
mm.
Um, However, there are terms in like Latino culture or Mexican culture that you can be prideful of, that are like used to be kind of derogatory terms that are now just like, okay, yeah, I am that.
Yeah.
And what?
Like
Like
Chicano.
yeah,
Like
like
Chicano.
Chicano. Like Chicano. But Chino in itself is more of a nickname and a description of a
Mm.
certain person.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Does that
That's
make
fair.
sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
take it from you that you know more about this professionally. I'm
Yeah.
just I'm over here reading what I find on the internet. I'm like, "Oh, this is interesting."
Yeah, no, Chino is definitely more of just like a descriptor and a nickname.
Yes. One more city in Mexico that I do want to shout out. Shout out to your mom. Shout out to
Mhm.
your mom because she's from Guadalajara, rather Guadalajara. You feel me?
Guadalajara.
Guadalajara.
You say the G like g, like you're not supposed to say that. It's
Well,
Guadalajara.
all I know is there's two Guadalajaras. One, there's the one where your mom is from, and two, there's one in the Mission District that sells some fire ass super quesadillas. Let me tell you
Oh
that.
my
Shout out to Guadalajara
gosh.
on Mission Street.
Okay, first off, babe, if you're gonna be like in a relationship with a Mexican, you have to say Guadalajara.
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 But to be fair, the one on Mission Street is Guadalajara.
It's no,
No,
it's
no,
still
no,
it's
wait.
no, babe.
Okay, wait.
Just
But
because
okay,
it's a
wait.
restaurant name doesn't mean you still say the G, okay? It's
Okay. Wait,
Guadalajara.
can I get into this?
Guadalajara.
Can I get into a very quick tangent? I want to get into a very quick tangent. I
Oh my
had this
God.
discussion with Jackie's auntie, and or actually Jackie's auntie and her uncle, right? They're married. They're not like separate auntie, separate uncle, right? So they're talking to me about like, yo, Nico, like, they always talk to me about like Bay Area stuff because they want to relate to me. And I'm like, cool. They're like, we went up to the Bay Area one time and my cousins, we went to their city and we just thought they were saying it's so weird. I was like, what city is it? And they're like, Vallejo. I'm
Like,
like, you mean Vallejo? They're like, no, but it's pronounced Vallejo. I'm like, I get what you mean. You roll the L's, you got the J in there. I get it. It's part of
Vallejo.
Spanish, but 1,000%, it's Vallejo. It is not Vallejo. No matter how much you try to put the Spanish flair, it is Vallejo.
I try and put the Spanish flair to it because it's like I read it how I like would say it. Like it's or I say it how like I read it. It's like
Yeah.
it's Vallejo.
No,
It's
and I get what you mean, but it's Vallejo.
I'm still gonna say Vallejo. It's like what other cities are there too that I say like no, it's
Well, to be
like
fair, it's not Los Angeles, it's Los Angeles.
it's Los
But
Angeles.
no,
Well,
but who says Los Angeles?
people who speak Spanish. People who speak Spanish, babe.
For instance,
Ask my grandma where she lives. She's gonna say Los Angeles.
it's, it's San Francisco, not San Francisco.
But that's how Spanish people say it.
I know.
If you
I
ask my grandma, where did you go on vacation? She's
know.
gonna be like San Francisco. She's gonna not
Oh
gonna say San
man.
Francisco.
Oh man, that's funny. That is funny. You know, I you
It's
know,
Vallejo.
no, it's Vallejo.
It's
I promise you.
Vallejo.
You ask anybody who's from Vallejo, they'll be like, "No, we're from Vallejo." No, but a little bit more of off tangent. Like, so I had this struggle growing up because my actual name is Nicolas, but I had a lot of like white teachers growing up,
Hmm.
so they would always call me Nicholas. And just me, I just would never correct them. I'm just like, whatever. It's easier to just not correct them. But once I started exploring the world and understanding my culture more, I started to take more ownership of Nicolas. And I'll admit sometimes it slips, and I'll tell someone, yeah, Nicholas, whatever. But more often now, I'll be like, yeah, my name is Nicolas Triunfante.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, and I think I make it a point to when like I do call you by your name, I do make it a point to say Nicolas. Or
Oh
if like you
God.
just don't hear me, like after 5 times of me calling you, I'll say Nicholas.
Well, so you're in trouble in a Filipino household when you get called your entire name.
Oh,
Like I'll be
absolutely.
downstairs chilling, and then all I hear is Nicolas, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like God, just shoot me down with a thunderbolt right now. I do not want to deal with the rage that my mother
That
is
was
about to bestow upon my body.
that was literally me growing up. I went from Jackie to Jacqueline real fucking quick. Like if I heard Jacqueline, I was like, God damn it, what did I do? Like I started deleting like conversations off my phone. I was like, they're gonna take away my phone. I don't
Oh
know
yeah.
what's happening.
That's
Yeah.
why. That's when you pull off the fake sleep, or you hop in the shower just to like
Yeah.
delay the rage. Like, hold
Once
on, I'm about to take like a 30-minute shower.
once I heard Jacqueline or my full name, I was like, all right, I'm
I'm
out. I'm in
vibing.
trouble. I don't know what I did, but I'm in trouble.
Right.
Or like even like if my mom just now says Jacqueline, I'm like, why are you calling me Jacqueline? I haven't done anything. And
That's
she goes,
hella
because
funny.
that's your name. And I was just like, yeah, but you only call me that when I'm in trouble. If I'm not in trouble, don't call me Jacqueline.
You know what I noticed? I think where were we? We were in like Big Bear or something. And you got so mad that your brother Jacob called you Jacqueline.
Oh yeah, he knows. Yeah, he knows. And I remember Denise told him, like, my
Oh yeah, I
sister-in-law,
remember
she
that
told
too.
him, like, hey, you need to apologize to your sister because he's all like Jacqueline, or he said something. He was trying to be like superior and he's all like Jacqueline. And I looked at him, I was like, don't you fucking call me Jacqueline ever again.
It's a serious problem when your siblings start calling you by your first name, and I'm just like, dude, like, what are you doing? But
Yeah.
that could also get super. So we're still on this tangent right now, but that can actually be like super confusing if you are specifically in a Filipino household. So we didn't get to talk about my shroom experience the other day, but I will just say this. Both myself and my Kuya Mike were in the same room, and we're just like chopping it up. And then my little sister Sabrina is like, Kuya. And we both look. Me and my Kuya Mike both look, and we're just like, what? And she's like, oh shit, no, I meant like my Kuya Nico, not you, Kuya Mike.
I'm
So
sick.
confusing.
That's like one thing that like I've noticed like in Filipino culture where it's just like what happens if you need to call like a certain kuya? Like do you just like y'all just say kuya and then but it's also too like with me and my family, we just say tia and then they all turn. I'm just like my tia Steph, my tia Jenny,
Everyone.
like
Yeah, everyone just looks. Like
yeah.
another weird thing is like my dad calls me Kuya. And it's kind
Yeah,
of
I
weird.
did.
It's kind of weird if you like understand Tagalog because again, for people who might need like a refresher, kuya means like older brother or like
Mhm.
older male cousin, older male like figure, right?
Yeah.
And so my dad will call me kuya, but the reason why he does that is because he tried to get Sabrina acclimated into calling me kuya. That
Yeah.
now he is just stuck calling me kuya, and it's like the weirdest shit when like my Filipino homies are over, and then my dad is like kuya, and then they're just like, huh? What does
They're
this mean?
confused.
Are you older?
You know what I find interesting too is that your mom calls you son.
Oh
She
yeah,
calls you
because my
son.
mom's more American.
But like my parents don't do that. They don't call me like daughter. They don't call my brother like son. They just call us by our names, or they call like my mom calls my brother like mijo, which I guess is son.
Yeah,
But
it's
like,
son. It's like
but
little
yeah,
boy,
but
right?
like,
It's the same.
yeah, like yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like, it's more like hey Jay, hey Jack,
yeah.
than anything.
Well, even my mom will call me Anak, which means like my child. So, it kind of goes all these ways. All right,
Yeah,
y'all. We are off tangent now and going back to the subject. Guadala- Guadalajara,
there you go.
right, is actually having a steady rising population of Nikkei. And I'm hoping I pronounced this correctly. It's spelled
Nick,
Nikkei.
you did say it right,
And
Nikkei.
what Nikkei is, it is Japanese people whose native home is not Japan. So you're from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you have Japanese descent, but you were born in like Mexico, for example, or you
Mm-hmm.
have Japanese descent, but you're like born in Brazil. So
Mm-hmm.
if I could go over these three waves of migration from Japan to Latin America. The first one started as back as like the 1800s, and then in the 1920s, when Japanese people were actually migrating out of Japan, like because of World War II and whatnot, the
Mm-hmm.
United States actually limited access from Asian immigrants to go into the United States. So they were like, well, fuck it. I mean, we're just gonna go to like Latin America, or we're just gonna go to like Canada or
Wherever
anywhere,
else.
wherever else that isn't Japan, because there's a freaking war going on right now.
Right.
But eventually the United States did open up their doors because they came to the consensus that it was a little bit racist, actually a lot of bit racist, to
It
be
wouldn't be
like,
the first time America was
that's what I'm
racist.
saying. But yeah, it would be like a lot of bit racist to not allow Japanese or like Asian people in general to come into the country. So those were the three waves. But overall, Brazil was the first place that Japanese immigrants migrated, and to this day has the largest Japanese population within Latin America.
Wow, Brazil, really?
Brazil,
That's
yes.
so interesting. That's so like, and when I say like random or like anything, like it's because I'm not used to it,
Hmm.
Like I wouldn't have thought, like
Well, here's
Brazil
an
of all places that is the next largest Japanese population.
here's actually another fun fact. Peru had the first Nikkei president. So Peru had the first
A
Japanese
Japanese
and
descendant.
Peruvian president. His name
Wow.
was Alberto Fujimori. But
That's so funny to me when it's just like your name is Alberto, but your last name is
it's
Fujimori.
Japanese as hell.
It's just like I'd be like, okay,
Are you
what's going
sure?
on here? What is going on here?
That's one of them. If you're like a bouncer at like a club or something and you read the ID, you're like, this got to be fake, bro. Alberto
Yeah,
Fujimori.
Fujimori.
No, but so I didn't read too much into it, but I guess there was a lot of like backlash because he was Japanese.
Yeah,
Like,
I
even
can
though he
see
was
that.
born in Peru and he is technically like
Peruvian.
Peruvian, like it's that weird situation where it's like, yeah, you're born here, but you're not like Peruvian. It's kind of like Elon Musk. Like he was born in Africa, but he's not like African. You know what I mean? Like he's not like
Yeah,
African. It's one of those
yeah.
situations. So there was a lot of backlash. So I don't believe his term lasted too long.
Oh,
Somebody
okay.
please correct me on that if you're listening to this podcast. And one more fun fact about like Latin Nikkei culture. Colombia actually became the home for Hibakusa, which was
Mm.
another term for atomic bombing survivors. So, there was a freaking atomic bomb that hit Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of them fled to Colombia. It became like the natural home.
Most.
Yeah, most. It became the natural home for atomic bombing survivors. And, like,
Wow.
if you think about, let's say, like the homeless issue that we have over here in just California alone, like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine what it's like being an atomic bomb survivor. Like, surviving the radiation, the
Hmm.
impact, the trauma, and they're all just packed into Colombia.
And into a completely different like culture.
Yeah,
And
it's nuts.
yeah, that's crazy. And it's also, I just hope that, like, with all this migration of Japanese people going into these Latin American countries, that
Hmm.
these Latin American countries opened up their doors for them,
Yeah.
in the sense of like, we accept you, we know that you've been through things, and you're a part of our culture now.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
again, if we go back to the slave trade, it literally went from Japan to the Philippines to Mexico and other parts of Latin America. It's like we're all the same. And I think that's the
Yeah.
main point that I wanted to get. Well, that's the main point that I got from like all my research is that like we've all been through the same thing, whether you are Japanese, Filipino, and Mexican. And that's me keeping it on subject. Like,
Mhm.
imagine how many more cultures were affected by a very similar situation that, Spaniards did to our people back then.
Mhm.
It's like it's kind of it's like this sad but also like cool situation to where it's like we're all connected by this like long-term trauma that
Yeah.
happened so long ago.
Yeah. But
But
it's very, very interesting, this whole like subculture thing that, especially like how Chicano culture just moves into Japan, because also too, it's very interesting that Japanese have adapted Chicano culture, or not
oh yeah.
adapted, adopted Chicano culture, because like, remember when I was talking to you in a few podcasts ago, that Chicano used to be a derogatory term,
Yeah.
it used to be something to, sorry, that was socks. It used to be something that would make us feel smaller than,
Yeah.
and for then us to accept it not as a racial slur, but then as a culture, to create a culture of Chicano culture, and then have somebody else of a different, completely different cultures be like, that's so cool, that's so
Yeah.
interesting, like, I want to be like that, or I want to look like that, or I want to learn more about it. It's just like, it's a prideful thing when, at least for me, some people may, and this is the problem, I think, for some people, it's like, and this is my opinion, everybody, this is my opinion, but I think people now are so sensitive to culture vulture. It's like they feel like, oh, like they're adapting our culture, like they get their own, blah blah blah. It's like, no, like, I don't care. Like, I see that Chicano culture is being adapted in Japan,
Mhm.
and or adapted into Japan, and I'm just like, hell yeah, that's cool. Like,
Yeah.
when I go, they're probably gonna, when I go, and if I go to a certain city that has Chicano culture and they see me, they're gonna be like, holy shit, like, we have a Chicano here, we have a Mexican here. Like, let's
Yeah.
learn, let's ask her, let me, like, tell them something that they might not know.
Yeah. And it should, I think at that point you're just like spreading the goodness of one culture to the next.
Yeah.
But even going to the culture vulture situation, like, um, the one topic that a lot of people were talking about when it came to this particular subject is like, is it racist? Is it like a culture vulture type situation? But
Or culture appropriation, like,
cultural
it's like,
appropriation, yeah, and it's like, well, I specifically cannot speak for it. I can at least
mhm,
give my opinion on like how I would personally view it if it was like someone taking Filipino culture, for example. Like, it depends on like how it's done and how tapped into the community you are. So
yes.
on like a more lighthearted subject and how I personally would not see it as like cultural appropriation, there's a whole bunch of lowriders in Japan. And
Yeah.
they actually have like lowrider shows like how you would see in like LA or even just California in general, right?
Literally the last Sunday of every month, or the first Sunday of every month, there's a, lowrider cruise that goes down literally 2 blocks from me.
Yeah,
And
and
that's so
it's
cool.
sick. It's so cool. But this guy, his name is Junichi Shimodaira. So I guess he kept on traveling from Japan back to LA and was just so fascinated by Chicano culture when it came to like lowriders. And so he's like, yo, like they're doing this over in LA. Like, and he was just so interested in the actual culture. He's like, let's do this in Japan too.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually started, well, I wouldn't say it started, but like it definitely influenced more Japanese people to get more involved with like Chicano culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I think, at least in my humble opinion, if you go to the city where it's from and you learn about the culture and you're
Mm-hmm.
just so engulfed in it and you want to bring it back to your city to share it, I personally would not think that's like cultural appropriation.
Yeah, and I don't think so either. And I'm speaking from being part of that culture, you know?
Yeah.
I like you said, if you are, you know, some people may not be able to have the means to come to LA and experience it firsthand where it started,
Yeah.
you know? But if you read about it, if you learn about it, and if you understand that like there are certain things that you can't do
Yeah.
and that you can't claim,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you know, there's certain things that there are like kind of guidelines, you know? But
Yeah.
as far as the culture itself of like the lowrider culture, the music, the style of fashion, you know, that's fine. Like that's
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, you know. Um, who's to say that Latinos and Hispanics are the only ones that with curly hair that can put mousse in their hair to look make it look wet all day,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
That's not something that I'm gonna be like, no, that's ours and you can't take it. It's like, no, dog, like just fucking put mousse in your hair. I don't care. I don't
Yeah,
care.
like it doesn't matter. Like I think, one of the most interesting videos that I seen this past week, it was this black dude in Seattle and
Mm-hmm.
he went to a Filipino restaurant, kind of like a Dollar Hits
Mm-hmm.
over in Seattle, and this guy's Tagalog was better than way more people that I've ever like met in my life. Like his
Yeah.
Tagalog was so phenomenal to where I was like, if I just closed my eyes, I would just figure this guy is Filipino.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, I don't know the people he's around. I mean, obviously they're like Filipino, but he's learned enough to like find an appreciation for the culture. So it's that
Yes.
fine line between like appreciating the culture so you're not appropriating.
And that is where I want to talk about something. I want to get off on a little tangent real quick.
Yeah.
There is like that was such like a good thing that you said. Like there's
That
a
was kind of
difference
fire,
between
huh?
appreciating the culture and appropriating the culture because as of recently, Hailey Bieber has come under fire for this makeup look that she's, you know, so-called created and is owning called brownie glazed lips. And what it is brown lip liner and gloss. And what bothers me and what bothers a lot of other people who are Black, who are Hispanic, who are Latino, who are, you know, of a person of color, my lips are brownie glazed lips, and so
Mm,
are theirs. And for someone who is white to take ownership of big hoops, slick back buns, and brownie glazed lips
it's
when it's
insane.
something that was our culture already, and taking it as their own and trying to own it and make it a trend when that's how our whole that's our style, that's our life, and that's what our appearance is. And that is cultural appropriation rather than her appreciating the culture.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just not even like for that, honestly. It kind of reminds me about how who was it? Like Kylie Jenner made like the tequila. Remember? I think you were talking to
Yeah.
me about that like a while ago.
Yeah, she
But
can't like if you're gonna here's my thing. If you're gonna create a tequila and you're not, you know, from a certain descent of where tequila
yes.
comes from, at
Yes.
least educate yourself on one how to say
Mm-hmm.
these tequilas. You're
Mm-hmm.
gonna tell me that her saying añejo, like no, añejo, like no, it's añejo. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
añejo.
Yeah.
And it's blanco, it's not blanco, it's blanco. It's
Yeah.
not reposado, it's reposado. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's my thing. It's like
Well, I
and
think
like
in situations like that, like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I could actually offer a solution to this. Like, let's say me, for example, I wanted to
mhm,
make a tequila,
mhm,
but I just naturally have like some love for tequila. But I feel like if I'm trying to make like a tequila brand,
mhm,
then I should actually pair up with someone who is from that culture and is like, hey, like, I think this is an opportunity that we can both like benefit from. Like, I just love tequila. This is your brand, and like, or, well, rather, this is like your people's thing, and I don't want to appropriate it. Similarly, someone who does this in this day and age is E40 with
mhm.
Chef Alex from the Lumpia Company.
Yeah,
Like,
and
and I don't know if E40 grew up with Filipinos, but all I know is he loves lumpia and he loves
yeah,
Filipinos. So the best way for him to ever be a part owner of the Lumpia Company is to have the other part owner be Filipino. I'm
and
like, this
that's
is
the
the way it's
thing.
supposed to go, y'all.
That's the thing where there's a difference between appreciating the culture and appropriating it. And like you said, if there's someone wants to create a tequila brand, that's fine. Create a tequila brand. I don't give a shit. Most of the tequilas that people create are shitty anyway. Like, but if you're gonna do that and you're not a person of where it's derived from,
Mm-hmm.
have a business partner or partner with a family in Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
in a certain city in Mexico that can provide you
Mm-hmm.
that product
Yeah.
and help them benefit from this.
Yeah.
Don't just use them, help them benefit from this.
Yeah, it's giving back to the community, everybody. Like, if you really appreciate the culture that you were trying to profit off from, give that money back. Like,
Yeah.
give some of that money back.
And honestly, like I said, this whole Haley Bieber thing, I just like, she's not gonna say anything, you know?
Yeah,
She's not
yeah.
gonna say, like, I know, I'm sorry I appropriated the culture. She's not. But it's holding these people accountable. It's holding these
Mhm.
people accountable saying, you're a culture vulture, you're
Mhm.
appropriating my culture,
Mhm.
and this is why.
Yep. 1000%.
And that's why for me this Chicano culture being adopted in Japan, it's not cultural appropriation. It's for me, it's not,
Yeah.
it's them appreciating, and it's them appreciating the culture and doing it justice too. It'd be different if they were, I don't know, if they were claiming to be Chicano and
Mhm.
doing all sorts of things that just give a bad light on Chicano culture. It'd be
Yeah.
different.
Yeah,
But
for
it's
sure.
them just appreciating it and adopting it into their own. And
Yes.
that's not a problem for me,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think one thing that Japanese people have given back to the Latino culture is anime. Latinos
Yeah,
love anime.
yeah,
Latinx love anime.
they do.
And as we end this podcast, y'all, like, I want to. I actually looked this up right before we started the podcast, but there's a whole heap of Latino inspired anime characters, and it is kind of crazy.
Oh,
But if I just wanted to talk about one, it's one that I actually like really know. It's Monkey D. Luffy from One Piece. So Monkey D. Luffy from One Piece, for the people who didn't know, it's actually like said like he's Brazilian.
oh,
Yeah, he's Brazilian. But if you like look at the anime like in its like first form, it's like it's this guy speaking in Japanese.
interesting.
But like a lot of the characters in that specific anime like do also have like Latino descent. And there's a couple characters in like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example. a couple characters, I believe, in like Bleach as well, who also have Latino descent. So Japanese people have like, this thing for like saying like, hey, like because we're basing it in like whatever region we think this is, like we're also going to give back and be like, hey, like I hope you feel represented by these characters that we're putting out. Whether
Yeah.
you feel represented by a Monkey D. Luffy, whether you are Brazilian or you just want to like cherish him as like, yo, like he's Latino and it's cool. So, shout out to Japan for giving back to the Latin community. So, yeah.
Yes.
Monkey
Yeah.
D. Luffy is Brazilian, y'all. I was thinking
that's
that was
super
going to be
cool.
the name of the podcast, but how Chicano culture got to Japan, that's the name of the damn podcast.
Yes. Yeah. I think, and I'm also contemplating like appreciating culture versus appropriating it.
Yeah,
How Chicano culture
yeah.
got in
We could
Japan.
add that to the title too. We do want to add y'all to the bill for the Mexipino Food Fest once again, going down October 16th, Sunday, on at District 6 in San Francisco, California. Brought to you by Mexipino Podcast, District 6, and Sanzo.
Yes, remember, guys, all the information that you guys will need can be found right here in between us, and then also on our links in the description, in our bios on Instagram. You can find it on at Mexipino Podcast on Instagram, at I'm Jackie Ramirez, and your
Oh,
Instagram. Right?
at Nico, aka Blitz. I was like, huh? What? I thought
Yeah.
you were gonna say mine too.
No, and then well, I was gonna give you a chance to say yours. And then also too, if you guys want to help keep this podcast going, please check out our Patreon. Yeah, that's really
Or
cool too.
Patreon.
Patreon.
Patron?
Patron.
Patron? Patreon, y'all. Patreon.
Patreon. Yes,
Yeah,
all
y'all.
our links are in there.
Thank you so much. My name is Nico Blitz.
And I'm Jackie Ramirez.
And this is the Mexipino Podcast. We are out, everybody. Bye.
Adios.